Welcome to the You Inside You, the podcast where you discover to know how to recognize and trust your voice of your true self. I'm Trine Schmidt, and today's episode is especially meaningful to me. I'm honored to be sitting down with one of my greatest mentors and teachers, David Swindall. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist, former professor, and a clinical supervisor who has spent over 48 years helping people heal, grow, and find their way back to themselves. David first caught my professional attention years ago when he walked into a classroom holding a painting his wife had created. The image showed tall buildings in the distance and a quiet landscape in the foreground. He used it to teach systems theory or family therapy, and how a small change in one part of the system can completely transform the whole picture. That metaphor has stayed with me ever since, and we're going to be talking about that today. Later, I had the privilege of observing and co-facilitating his batterers intervention group, where I witnessed week after week the incredible transformations of men learning to take responsibility for their emotions, behaviors, and their lives. David is a man of depth, humility, spiritual insight, and someone who teaches not just through words, but through his presence. He has helped shape how I see therapy, relationships, and the human capacity for change. So please join me in welcoming my mentor and dear friend, David Swindall, to the You Inside You. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Oh, I have been thinking a lot about you and how I wanted to invite you here to my podcast. And it's a selfish reason for me because I always want to see more of you. However, you have been such an impact and influence in my life personally, but also professionally. And the gifts that I am passing on to my clients and the people that I work with have greatly been shaped by your presence. What stands out to me the most, besides the painting, we're going to be talking about that, is really your capacity to see people for who they are, not judging their behaviors. That there's a light and there's hope, and anything can change. Your teachings are just full of depth and heart, and you are never worried about putting your personal life and your stories out there for people to see that change is really possible. So I want to hear more for you. I could be talking about you forever because I really love who you are and what you do. I want to know a little bit tell us about the painting, actually. I want you to tell us that story because it was really mind-blowing for me, not just about family therapists, but really how life works, this puzzle piece of life, how we think that we know exactly what we're doing, and changing one thing is so obvious, but it's not always so obvious.
Thank you. That inspiration, I must have had the painting with me, and I pulled it out.
You did.
But it was a print that my wife had done of city of Atlanta, and she'd done a big painting of it, and this was her little print of it. And I thought, and I looked at it and I said, something about this bothers me. And I wasn't sure what it was. But then the next day I said, oh, you changed it. And I thought it was up at the buildings. She said, no, I did it down here at the foreground. Some of the, it's hard to see that without having the picture. And I don't know where it is. And so I said, that's family therapy, because oftentimes people will come in with us with a quote unquote problem child, the identified patient. And as a therapist, I want to see the whole picture. And sometimes by making a change here, you change your perspective. I think that's what therapy is being able to change our perspective, how we see things. and helping people have a different perspective about what they're looking at and change things. In therapy, they often call it reframing, but because you put a different frame on it, you see it differently. My wife and I went to the Fine Arts Museum Saturday, and I was looking at old masters' paintings, and I was just looking and looking and looking and looking at the paintings and thinking, what did they see? And it was dark and light, and the use of dark and light, and how they did the paintings. And I just thought it was just fantastic. Um,
Mm.
so that's what therapy is for me, is helping people see things in a different way.
Mm. And I think that's the powerful connection that I really had with you. You were my supervisor for a while, and the way you can bring life stories and real life meaning into this change, because it's not just theory and steps and here's what to do, but it's really this profound new way of looking at yourself. And some of the things we're talking about in You Inside You is really going into understanding your inner self, your inner being, your true self. So I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about who you are. Who were you before becoming a therapist, and walk us through that briefly, how you ended up in therapy and helping, hundreds and thousands of people now.
Oh my goodness. Well, some people ask me that, and I think that I became a therapist because of my family.
Mm.
Uh, and I remember my father asking me questions, and he said, "You're a psychologist?" I said, "No, I'm not. I was in undergraduate program." But he put that mantle on me, and somehow I was supposed to solve the family problems. And I can remember writing a letter to my father that I never mailed, but I kept it, which said, I really can't solve this problem. You have to talk to somebody because I don't have the leverage. And I was the oldest of 5 kids, and being able to see things from a different perspective and recognize how what I grew up with impacted me. Uh, yeah. When my father died, he was very abusive, and was probably one of the reasons I went into working with men who were abusive. My father was very abusive, and did very awful things. And so when he died, I thought about what he gave to me, and he was also a wonderful person. And so it was this juxtaposition of light and dark again. And so I thought, what would it be like if I just took the gold that he gave me? And so I saw burning away all of the negative things that he did and just kept the gold. And I'll take that and put it in my heart. And that's what I did with my father. And my siblings, they still had a lot of hurt and anger with him. I didn't.
Mm.
Not that I said that he did wonderful things and didn't do awful things. I just took what it meant to me, and that's what I do with clients. They could do some awful things. Um, I remember one guy, he talked about putting his hands around his partner's throat. I said, "You didn't just put your hands around her throat; you strangled her." Oh yeah. I can remember working with being a friend with a man who was a physician. He was from Korea. He said the Korean language is very concrete. And when I was a little boy, I remember having thoughts, but I didn't have words for them. And when I learned English, there were words for the thoughts that I had. And I thought, that's powerful. So learning words to describe our feelings and who we are inside and the thoughts that we have. So sometimes I want to give people a different vocabulary, helping them describe what they're experiencing, what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they're knowing. That they may have them, but they don't have words for it yet.
And this part was really, really profound for me, because that is the language, or actually the concept that you labeled for me, something that obviously we learn in grad school and we learn as a therapist. But it became a mission for me with this giving language to people. And I must say, there was one scenario that really stood out for me in one of your groups. And I'm sure you've had this happen over and over, and I certainly saw versions of this, but this guy stood up, and I think it was his 26th week, and he reflected back on his process. And I remember him saying, oh, I'm getting goosebumps. I wish I'd known this earlier. I would not have lost my wife, my kids, my job. I now have a felon on my record. I didn't know. I just didn't know. And just tears was coming down his face. And there was also people in there that didn't believe they would belong there because they just started the program, right? This unawareness of what's really happening, that this is not about fault. This is just about not knowing, and how we were not brought up with learning how to navigate our thoughts, our emotions, having vocabulary for it, making it more normalized that, oh, I'm having these emotions and I don't have to blame other people for it, and I can actually handle all this myself. We're just not taught that. And I remember specifically in that moment that this is what I was set out to do. That
Yes.
if this was not about the sadness that he went through, this was more the gift that he was given, that he got to wake up. This lifetime he got to wake up. It doesn't matter what age people are at, that he got to wake up and actually live his life how we're meant to be. He was like invited into the you inside you, and he can finally live in freedom and peace because he could choose.
That's it.
It's just so, so profound. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of that in your groups over the years.
Again and again and again, a lot of the men, almost every, I have them write a completion letter, and almost everyone says, I didn't think I belonged here. I didn't think this was what I fit in. And over time, they find out that they have a lot in common, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And I didn't know. So learning some relationship skills. One of the biggest ones is how my behavior affects the other person. I'm not aware of the impact of that. And I may want to discount it. I may want to justify it and defend what I did from my perspective. But it's really looking and seeing how the other person experienced that. That really makes a difference.
Absolutely.
And that means I have to give up my ego, my sense of self, to go, as your podcast calls it, the you inside you, go down to my core value. Yeah.
So how did you, growing up, under kind of traumatic circumstances, how and when do you first discover that there was this deeper part of yourself? Some people may call it, connection to God, or, a deep inner knowing or an intuition. Was that something that was with you for a while, or when did that become more dominant in your life?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. I think it was a gradual awareness. I can remember when I was, I think 9 years old, 10 years old, I went to the confirmation class in church. And the minister made a personal visit to my parents and said, he's too young to become a member of the church, but he knows all this. And I knew all the information. So they let me join the church, even though I was too young. And I think the church connected me to something greater than myself. There's a sense of awe, the stories, and the biblical stories were very powerful to me. The stories of the Old Testament, the New Testament, those stories, particularly the stories of Jesus uh, changing lives and by his presence. I can remember when I was I forgot what I was doing now. I was doing my internship after I graduated from seminary. And I remember a family person had died, and I was on call, and I had to go and talk to this family member. Uh, I thought, I don't know what to say. And someone said to me, they don't really want to hear what you have to say. They just want your presence.
Mm.
So I came and I sat with this person and offered my presence. And that's what I have to give, is my presence, the you inside you.
Mm.
And that touched the inside of that person. Yeah.
And we are taught this, or at least I was taught that as a therapist, that we really can't minimize our presence, the effects of our presence with people, like how huge that is compared to our words. Presence, I also see as really being in the moment, in our being, where often talking brings us into our head, and more of that, the that part of the brain that, a lot more logical, that is not necessarily connected with being present and being in our being. So that's also what we teach parents to be present with our children. It's very hard for us to just sit and be present with what is, be present with our partner, listening, just being with what is without the judgment, without the need to defend ourselves, without the need to judge ourselves, really separating. I was thinking about that when you're talking about the people that you have worked with, this awareness that there's two things happening, right? That there's what's happening inside of me and what's happening with the ego that's coming in and wanting to defend and sabotage and criticize and attack, and really distinguishing between what is really happening, what's really present. And that's where that language can kind of bridge that, the awareness of observing your body, right? Going through breathing, using stop, which is one of the techniques you taught me. Stop, take, a few deep
Deep
breaths,
breath, observe, and then proceed.
and then proceed with the best intention of yourself and others.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, in
STP.
your work with people in domestic violence, what have you learned about what truly brings people awareness? And what is that turning point when they get to see their own part in the story or in the conflict?
It's being able to recognize that I am enough. I don't have to compare myself to anybody else.
Mm.
And I see you, and you see me, and I want to be present. But we have so many things that get in the way of that. I remember you were talking about a man in class. I remember his father died when he was like 12, 14 years old. He was the oldest boy, maybe the only boy. I think he was the only boy. And he was given the role of being the man of the house now. And his friends recognized something's wrong here. He said, I'm the man of the house. His mother, his sisters did what he told them to do. And so when he got married and had children, he carried that on, and his wife said, "No, I'm not going to do that." And so he had this conflict. How do I deal with this? And he became abusive and violent to her. She called the police, and he was arrested. And it took him a long time to become to that awareness that what seemed like a gift was not really a gift to him. Being the man of the house put him above everyone else, and a huge responsibility. And it was a real freedom for him to be able to say, "This is what I think. What do you think? How would you deal with this?" And it's a both and rather than an either or. And that's a real shift for many people. And you talked about choice. We have to make a choice. Yeah. I don't think that when you were working with me that I had spent a lot of time talking about Viktor Frankl, but I like to talk about Viktor Frankl, who was in a concentration camp for the crime of being a Jew. And the Nazis took over Europe. They invaded Austria, where he lived. And he was a brilliant psychologist, very successful. A psychiatrist, brilliant psychiatrist. And he was put in the concentration camp for 3 years. He watched people survive, people who died. His wife, his children, his parents, his brother, all were murdered by the Nazis. Only he and his sister survived. They were in separate concentration camps. He was liberated, and he wrote about 6 months after he was liberated, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he reflected on how he and other people survived. He said, we had a choice. And we had to make a decision about our attitude. Yes, we had a lot of suffering. It wasn't that we didn't suffer. We did suffer. Had food shortage, food hunger. We didn't know whether we were going to be gassed or not. I didn't know what had happened with my wife, my children, my parents, until he was liberated 3 years later. So he then wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning. So I like to share that with people, that I don't think that you've experienced anything as awful as that, because it's not fair. Life is not fair. He was a Jew. He was born a Jew. He couldn't do anything about that. And yet he suffered because of it. And so I think that telling that story helps people recognize their own suffering. Who was it? Scott Peck wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled. And I think that first sentence made it a bestseller for over 10 years. The first sentence was, life is difficult. And we think, oh, well, when I get my college degree, when I get married, when I have a first child, blah, 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 life will be better, life will be better. And it's just one damn thing after another.
Yes. And thank you so much for bringing that book up. That was probably one of the most pivotal moments in my life as well, reading that book. I think we read it through in grad school, actually.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Put things in perspective. Talk about putting things in perspective. And this book didn't go into, oh my gosh, he had it really hard and how sad this was. This was, again, that transformation of how he saw life and how he escaped or chose freedom inside his head. Like, he was completely free. He could choose wherever he went in his mind. And it is a book I also use with my clients, because it's not so much the comparison for, wow, life gets so much worse, but it really is a comparison in life always happens, like you're saying. It's never until something ends. It's never, oh, my circumstances will change soon, or I will have more money soon, or my relationship will improve soon. No, it might change, but it most likely will change when you start looking at things differently, when you're able to have more joy choose more joy, more joyful thoughts, reach for higher feeling thoughts, improve how you treat yourself, the self-talk, the kindness that you give other people. And all of that is reciprocal. You're manifesting your own reality is what I believe. And it really comes from that alignment within yourself. So circumstance, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? We really, really do not know what we're going to handle tomorrow. But what we can handle always is how we view it.
That's right.
So I really want to talk about the other part of the domestic violence. You know, you see couples a lot, and you work with women as well. Most of my audience are women, and tell me a little bit about what is it that gets women stuck sometimes in these relationships, and what are some of the pivotal moments for them in the awareness?
As I think about it, oftentimes I want to help a person, and particularly women, but also the men too, not see themselves as a victim. I don't think Viktor Frankl saw himself as a victim. He dealt with life as it was each day. And so I think that's a big shift to move yourself from being a poor me, look what they're doing to me, to I get to choose how I will deal with this. And I talked with a woman the other day, and her son is just so abusive to her. I said, call the police. She said, I can't do that to my son. I said, of course you can. You choose not to, and you're suffering. And he knows that he can spit on you, throw things at you, call you names, because there are no consequences. It's a hard one. I have a colleague, and she did call the police on her son, and he was into substance abuse pretty badly, and he went to rest care and was there for over a year. And he eventually found his partner, and they married and have a child now. That's been 5 or 6 years ago. But she couldn't see that. So what gets in the way oftentimes is our culture. We don't do that to people we love. Yes, we do. Being able to recognize that we have a choice, and they talk about tough love. That is tough love. It's really saying, I'm going to hold you accountable for this. And that's hard. That's hard. There's a lot of, why did she stay? Why did she put up with this? And so one of the things I want to teach couples, and particularly women, is I'm not going to allow this to happen. I also talk to men about that. But we have to do it in a loving and firm way, not a hostile, aggressive way.
So how do you set loving and firm boundaries? So let's say I'm starting to shift my mentality from that I have a choice. I'm not necessarily seeing myself as a victim anymore. I can kind of see that I do have some power, even though part of me might not feel that I have that power. I still see this coming at me. I don't really have a choice, but I'm starting to see that I have a choice. How can I set these loving and firm boundaries?
Well, first I have to check and making sure that I'm doing this because I really care about you. I really love you. I really care about you. You're important to me. And because you're important to me, I'm not going to allow myself, because I care about myself too. I love myself. I do hypnosis for people to stop smoking, and I'll ask them if you were to take a can of dog food, and it said, warning, this dog food will cause cancer in your dog. Would you feed it to your dog or to your pet? No. Well, let's look at the label on that cigarette pack. Oh, this will cause cancer. Well, you have to be loving and firm with yourself as well. and see how do you do that? How do you change your perspective on that? So yes, it's very hard. I'm not saying this is easy work. It's simple, but it's not easy.
And that brings me back to my own personal journey with discovering self-love. I was on, I think, my little icon on Facebook. People have been friends with me for a while. It said self-love for probably a decade, because it was really important to me. I had heard someone tell me that if I was brought up with parents who didn't love themselves, that there's no way that I would love myself, because you can say it all you want, right? But if you're teaching someone to not love themselves in the way they speak about themselves and the way they interact, and I was like, oh my gosh, I must not love myself, because I know for a fact my parents didn't love themselves at that time. And it was so true. And I all of a sudden saw all that evidence of it. My biggest passion or goal at that time was really figuring out, what does that look like? I started doing mirror work. I started recognizing my self-talk, even the way I spoke to other people, way of recognizing speaking to my kids, and that I was quite harsh with them at times when they were little. And I really saw that huge impact of, well, if I speak to them that way, how am I speaking to my inner child, right? How am I speaking to myself? So reading books like Dr. Shefali about conscious parenting really, really opened my eyes in how we as adults need to reparent ourselves, because we were not brought up with the language of emotional intelligence, understanding our emotions, or the impact that our actions have on others, and how to really stay in our own lane and not go over and do things for others and be responsible for other people's stuff, but really being accountable and responsible for our own emotions and behaviors. I don't know where I was going with that. Can you reflect on what I just said? I think it was leading up to a question here.
It's in there somewhere. Let me get it.
Yes.
Well, I will pick up on, you asked me earlier, how do you be lovingly firm?
Yeah.
And I think that's, there's not a judgmentalness to it. Because if I'm judgmental, I'm up here above, versus I have something to show you, to teach you. I'm reminding of when my son was 6 years old, I think. And it was, I said it was at Busch Gardens. My wife said it was at Weeki Wachee, but it really doesn't matter. It was in the summer, August, and it started to rain. And my son started running. And I said, Jonathan, slow down. You're going to fall and hurt yourself. I hardly got the words out of my mouth. And he fell and skinned his left knee. And I went up to him and I said, oh my, I bet that hurts real bad. Join him. And then I got a tissue out, because my daughter was a year old, and I carried tissues in my pocket. I carried the tissue, and I pulled it out, and I patted his knee. And I said, look at that nice, red, strong blood. Where did that blood come from? From inside him, the you inside you. But I didn't say it directly. That nice, red, strong blood. I said, come on, let's go get Lorraine to stand in the pavilion. So we did. While we're standing under the pavilion, this really happened. Another little boy, about the same age as Jonathan, had blonde hair, about the same age, was running. Father said, Johnny, his name was John, Johnny, slow down. You're going to fall and hurt yourself. Fell, skinned the same knee. Father went up and said, I told you so. You're acting just like a baby. Look at you, crying like a little girl. Come on, let's get under the pavilion. And so we're standing on the same pavilion, and the little boy, Johnny's mother, comes up and says, oh, Johnny, what's wrong? He cries. And Father said, correctly identifying the problem, he just wants attention. But wrong solution. Just ignore him. And so the mother ignored him, and Johnny cried. And so we're under the pavilion for about 30 minutes. So I think lovingly firm is to acknowledge a person's pain without pity. I didn't pity my son. I didn't castigate him and then I told you so, because that would be about my ego, and put him down. But I let him learn what that was like for himself. And right before our call, my son called, and he's so excited about his son being made in a basketball team. I think his son's about 12 years old. And they went to a meeting last night, and how much it's going to cost the family to go to practice and all the requirements and stuff. And he'll figure all that out. I don't have to tell him how to do that. But he's passed on to the generation. So what you learned from your parents is that I can't change my trajectory. And that's what I teach with the people, couples, and individuals. We can change our trajectory. What's the saying? It's never too late to have a happy childhood.
I love that. I've never heard that one before. Yeah. Yeah, I call it our transformations change generations. This is the ripple effect that you're talking about. It is so powerful. I have noticed in my own personal life that not only am I affecting my children's life, obviously, but my parents, actually a generation before me, have also benefited from the things that I have stepped into. And it's just so beautiful to see, friends, everybody close to you really harvest from anything that we do. The more we can be who we are, we're not forcing something on people, right? It's just being in our presence and in speaking our truth, role model, you being one of my great mentors. And I actually remember you talking about how, this is my interpretation of it, and correct me if I'm off of what you taught me. This is how I used it, or I'm using it now, is that when we're out of alignment, we go to two places. We either go to the superiority, where we want to be dominant and control everything and control every situation. Like if I'm in mommy mode and I get overwhelmed, I start nitpicking at everybody. It's like, you didn't do this right, and my nitpicker comes out. Or we go to kind of the inferiority, right? I did something bad. I am bad. And the self-criticism kind of sets in. And those are two very destructive and unhealthy loops that we can go into when we don't stay in our own power and we don't stay in alignment with ourselves. And this is from you, right? This is something I have been a good student. But it's so powerful the way that you describe things and how you show things with stories, because when that was divided for me, and I start recognizing in my own life and in my client's life that when I start on my nitpicking behavior, I know, right? It's a little alarm clock for myself. I'm like, okay, I'm not the best mommy I can be right now. I need to tone it down. I need to take some breaths. I need to align myself. What kind of unmet need might be happening for myself right now? How can I show up better for myself so I can be the best mother I can be in this moment? And it's just so important. And I hope people really are soaking in that these two versions of yourself are going to show up when you're covered in your bedroom and don't want to get out of bed because you feel so bad about your life and, oh my gosh, and I suck. And I'm there too sometimes. Again, I'm just out of alignment. There's really nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with my life. It's just the perspective that I got stuck on right now.
That's right.
Get myself back in alignment, go exercise, do something nice for myself. And isn't it amazing that 5-10 minutes later, you're like, oh, why were I even doing that? Right? We're just back on track again.
That's right. I like to call it taking that breath and coming to center. I'm no better than you, no worse. And so I come to center.
Yes.
And so when I'm centered and in alignment, I breathe easier. So pay attention to nitpicking, pay attention to your breath. I've had people tell me, "Oh, I just hold my breath." And I said, no. I had a man in Monday night class a couple of weeks ago, and I said, he was talking real fast. And I said, "I think you need to take a breath." So he said, last week, he said, I've been paying attention to my breathing this past week. I'm paying attention to that. I said, that's it. Paying attention. And once you pay attention, it changes everything. It changes your perspective. You come to center. That is alignment. So you've learned that when I become nitpicking, overwhelmed. What is the feeling of being overwhelmed? We have overwhelmed, underwhelmed, and I just think, let's just be whelmed.
I love that.
I
Yeah,
like to play with words.
I love it. I love it. Yes.
Yeah,
So yeah, breathing can really center ourselves.
that's
It's
it.
coming into the presence, right? And
Coming
at
into
the end
the
of the
present.
day, like we talked about before with the child, being present to what's active or alive inside of us, because most likely there's a little one or a part of ourselves that is throwing a tantrum
That's it.
and wants to take the command and tell us
Yeah.
what to do. And what I do in my work now is I do parts work, and I really help integrate those parts of ourselves that act out, and I really get in a way of staying in alignment. So when we come back into our breath and into our being and being in alignment, obviously those parts are not as active. So it's really paying attention to what gets activated inside of me in those moments. Maybe not in that moment. We want to kind of get present and centered as quick as we can, especially if we are dealing with other people and they need our presence and our attention. But later on, we can sit and reflect on this, especially when we are catching ourselves in certain themes that show up over and over again, or certain situations kind of trigger the overwhelmed or the anxiety or the anger. What part of that, can I be present with in this moment? So that's what I help people integrate. It's so important to have help and resources to do this work, because it can be very challenging to do ourselves. You use hypnosis, right? So tell us a little bit about how you use that and how that impact change.
I've always been fascinated by hypnosis.
Mm.
I think um, I can't think of the name of the book right now. It was in the 70s and came out um, about Milton Erickson's work, and it changed how I viewed the world and did my therapy. Um, he was a librarian. I could see him. I did some training with him. I can't, but it'll come to me in a minute. Um, but how do I use hypnosis? I listened to people. I had a person who said she had lost her phone, her sweater, her jacket, and she asked me, "What do you think's going on with me?" I said, "I wonder what it is you're wanting to let go of, and you haven't let go of it." And what she'd been doing had been giving care to a family member, and she had been wanting to cut back, but she felt guilty about it. And so she came to a term with it, and in herself, the you within herself, inside you. And she's decided she still was going to continue to give care to the family member. But she was having to confront that part of herself that felt guilty and said, no, I don't feel guilty. I'm going to do what I am going to do. I've got to take care of myself. So it was a both and rather than either or. That she was caught up in that either I do this or I don't do that. And so it's a both and. And so was that hypnosis? I think so, because it was listening and giving instructions and letting her discover that she had the answer within herself.
It almost reminds me of the painting again, that what we think on the surface is the
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
is something entirely different.
Yeah.
And I love discovering these things, of finding these root causes at times, and really
Yeah.
goes into what is our basic need? What are
Yeah.
our main desires that maybe have never come to the surface?
Yeah.
And we don't take care of it. And we're so busy taking care of other people and not speaking our truth. And when we really desire that, and we take care of those little wounded parts of us that have happened throughout the years, and we tie that all together, it is just so profound in the changes that happens for people, not just in the quote unquote problem they came in with, right? When you now see improved relationships, you see enhanced careers, you see money rolling in, you see new opportunities. It's just like you're removing a veil as soon as you transform that, and going through that subconscious in hypnosis or parts work, or I use energy healing, is just a quicker way to access, instead of going through our thinking mind, because we have so many defenses and blocks and stuff we don't have access to, that kind of taking that back door when our defenses are lowered a little bit can be a lot more profound.
Yeah, I think that's what hypnosis does. And I also use accelerated resolution therapy, which does eye movement. It's very similar to EMDR. But you have a movie, and so you see that movie, and then you change the movie. And changing the movie changes the emotions within the body. You become the director, and you get to change it any way you want. Wow. You mean my friend was not blown up? Well, you keep the memory, the knowledge of it, but the emotions change. You lose the feeling with it. And so there are lots of different ways of doing that.
Mm.
The person who developed this lady says it's not hypnosis, but I think it is. But that's another story. Yeah.
So, from your years as a teacher and therapist, what do you believe holds people back from being their honest self, from facing their truth or embracing their truth?
The first thought I had was that there's not one thing. It's being able to pay attention to all those things. It may be just changing in that picture, changing the foreground here, but it may be looking at one's life, as you said, going back to the unconscious and and trusting the person to find the solution. The solution is within the person. And so I don't have to come up with solutions for people. They have to come up with, I might come up with an image, a tool for a person to use, but they have to use that tool, and they have to go into their unconscious and use it. So the answer is always within.
Mm.
Um, and I
And,
and I don't know what they're going to do. And I don't know what the right answer is for that person.
mm. But it
Uh,
sounds like it's full of curiosity and really focusing, observing. And I love how you say, we always find the answers within. I have, vivid memories of many of my clients at the end of some of my programs. I asked what did you not know that you know now? And they're like, I didn't know I had all the answers within. And that's just profound. So being curious, being open to learn, because this is is self-discovery, to learning about your truth. It's especially because we have never had a map or never really talked about what that even looks like. It's not been demonstrated by our parents, maybe for some people, but certainly not for mine, and even people around me, because it was just full of blame and criticism and being hard on yourself, and life is hard and you have to work hard, and it just sucks sometimes. And that's just not how I see life now, right? It's just a choice every day. So
But
it's
the paradox is that you do work hard. I mean, here you are doing this podcast.
yes,
So it's a both and. Once again, it is not difficult, but takes perseverance and focus and attention
yes.
and keep at it. I don't feel like a failure. That didn't work out, but that works out. Okay. Yeah.
So what has your work taught you about love?
It's very fragile and very tough. It can turn like that, and it can go, or it can be what brings us together. And it always includes heartbreak. Because people don't do what we think we're saying and what we think we're doing, and the other person doesn't get it or see it the same way. Ooh, then that's where we have to deal with our ego. Oh, yeah. So what's taught me about love is to accept my own frailty and my partner's frailty. My wife and I have been married 51 years next month. Yeah. So we have ups and downs. And we're at that phase of our life that we know that we're not going to be together. One of us is going, and we say that in the marriage vows, one of you will leave the other. Yeah.
Is love sustainable? Is it something that you can keep at all times? How do you define that?
Well, it's an appreciation for yourself and appreciation for the other person.
Mm.
And for me, many years ago, I did the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. And my wife is an INTJ, introvert, intuitive, thinking, judging. She uses it's not judgmental, but judging. And I'm an E, extrovert, intuitive, feeling, perceptive, go with the flow. We're going to a service tomorrow for a friend of ours whose husband died. And I was talking to her the other day, and she said, the chapel only holds like 120 people, and I've got 30 people coming. And so I said to my wife, we need to get there early. And she said, oh, well, why don't we get there at 11 o'clock? And if they don't have any room, we will leave. And that's the difference between extrovert and introvert. You want to get there early and want to be there, and I want to leave. And so who's right? Well, yeah.
Really appreciation of each other's differences and staying in that, the love and appreciation, right? Really for ourselves, but also for the other person. What do I choose to focus on, right? What seeds do I choose to water today?
Yeah.
So after nearly 5 decades in this work that you've been in, what wisdom do you hope to leave behind, both for your clients and the next generations of therapists, coaches, healers?
Well, I've been very blessed, for example, passing on to the next generation as you are doing that. I've had some wonderful, wonderful teachers, and I've learned from a great deal. And I take a little bit here, a little bit there. I used to have a picture of Virginia Satir and Milton Erickson, and now I have a book by Martin Luther King Jr. and nonviolent communication. I have him looking at me over my shoulder. Well, you can see the bookcase over there.
Yes. Oh, yeah. You always have your bookcase, David. I always appreciated it so much. You can never sit down with any short, long meeting with David without him pulling a book from his shelf.
That's true. And when I had to move from my office, I gave up my office and moved into a retirement community almost 4 years ago now. I had to downsize my books and bookshelves. So I still have one big bookshelf, and I have several books in front of me here that I look at. And I don't like Kindle because you can't go directly to the page like I can in a book. I can look and see all these papers that I have marking where something is, something that's been meaningful to me.
So if you were to condense all your learnings and your teachings into one final little nugget of wisdom, what is something that you would like to leave the listeners with?
Connect to your core value. I now do a meditation, and I have people put their feet on the ground and feel themselves grounded. I had a guy last night said, I'm grounded and growing, grounded and growing. So I'm grounded in my worth and my value. That life parents and life events may disconnect me from my worth, my value. But it's always there. It's always there. We need connection. And I tell people if they lose sight of that, just look at your belly. You have a belly button. That means you didn't get into this world by yourself.
So fun. That's so good.
Which means you need people. We know about kids who who were in the orphanage after World War II, and they needed parents. They needed to be held, loved, appreciated. They fed them, they clothed them, but the babies died because they failed to thrive. So we need the emotional connection. So that's what helped me survive, I think, growing up. It was a both and. My father was also loving and kind and mean and hateful. So both and.
Both and. Well, I am so appreciative of having you here with me today and sharing your words of wisdom, sharing your presence, sharing your wisdom, your love with everybody, and for the world to see who you are and your great teachings. And so I really appreciate you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here.
And I appreciate you.
All right. So I really thank you guys for joining me in this special conversation with David Swindall today, a mentor, a teacher, and a healer whose wisdom has shaped so much of who I am, both as a therapist and as a human being. David's words remind us that change doesn't always happen where we expect it to. Sometimes one small shift in awareness, in compassion, in how we see ourselves or others can transform the whole picture.
Right.
If this conversation spoke to you, take a moment to reflect on where your own ripple of change might begin. Maybe it's in listening differently. Maybe it's in offering grace to yourself or someone else. Maybe it's simply in remembering that we all have the power to grow, one conscious choice at a time. David has spent his life helping others see the person behind the pain, and that message feels more needed now than ever. So I'm so grateful to share his voice and his legacy with you. Until next time, keep tuning inward, keep trusting the process, and keep honoring the you inside you. This is You Inside You with Trine Schmidt. Thank you for listening.